you, Luchan. I hope everybody can hear me okay. Good. Okay,
Yes.
so so Sergio just touched upon some of the risks that can arise with AI, and he gave examples of undesirable outcomes and what can be done in order to mitigate them. So I will focus more on K4 and K6 in terms of the key requirements, the issues of transparency and societal and environmental well-being. So if you could please go to the next slide. And I'm coming at this more from the perspective of energy economics, because that's my area of expertise. And I always think a lot about incentives. You might have the best technology or a promising technology, but if you don't have the correct landscape and the correct incentives in order for it to be used, in order to improve social welfare, then it might either not come to the market in the first place or might be exploited to entrench the existing problems that are already in society. Like Sergio was referring to the digital divide, it could make inequality even worse. So these two notions, this notion I think of it as market failure, where something is desirable for society, but nobody has the incentive to adopt it. And the other one is the notion of externalities, which is that the cost or the benefit from using a product or a service are incurred on or by other people. So this means that you don't take all of the full costs and benefits into account when you're making your decisions. And this causes the existing fissures in society. For example, if society wants to maximize welfare, companies want to maximize profit, where do they collide and lead to differences in outcomes, and what kinds of measures can you propose to overcome that kind of conflict? So these aspects I think are interwoven into K4 and K6. So I'll first look at transparency, which concerns traceability, explainability, and communication of AI. So AI can seem like a black box, and that might deter participants in the market from adopting it. One way to make it more credible is to come up with regulations or standards to whereby the logic of the AI's decision-making nexus could be established. So again, Sergio referred to some IEEE protocols. What I would like to see is that they become codified as part of regulatory standards, so that this can foster confidence in the uptake of the technology. And this is not so far-fetched, because from what I have seen in the power sector, where it's already a very complex environment, you have power being traded across many time periods using different kinds of financial and physical instruments. You have large power companies with diversified portfolios of assets that are offering in auctions. You need to have a way to verify that the way that the market is operating is somehow fair and is competitive. So a lot of these system operators around the world, they already have market surveillance committees that are able to scrutinize the bidding behavior of actors in these auctions. So I think and that builds confidence in the notion of markets and incentivizes more participants, which will improve social welfare. In a similar fashion, if there could be regulatory standards that used existing use cases, for example, financial trading of energy products or economic dispatch to clear power markets, they could be used to benchmark how AI is performing versus conventional or existing decision-making approaches. So then you could use that in order to audit the logic of the AI. Similarly to how financial auditing works, it's not going to work unless we all agree on a standard. So this is what one concrete step that I think would be helpful. And that way we can take the existing expertise, like for example, with the market surveillance committees, and couple it with the algorithmic advances in inverse optimization, where you see the results of, let's say, a market, And using inverse optimization, you're able to back out the bidding curves of different participants to see if they are exerting some kind of anti-competitive behavior. So this would enable us to unpick if there were certain issues with how AI was being used on top of the existing market platforms, and then to propose remedies to make sure that it could be aligned with social objectives. So speaking of social objectives, moving on to K6, then, sorry, previous slide, yeah, good. So this second big bullet point here, K6, which is dealing with societal and environmental well-being, our notions of sustainability, environmental friendliness, social impact, society and democracy. These are all objectives that policymakers would like to attain when it comes to the energy sector. And of course, new technologies are mechanisms to get us there. But we also need to think about the incentives for the adoption. So for example, it would be very far-fetched for me as an individual to open an account and start trading energy, offer the flexibility in my home in order to integrate renewable energy technologies. It would be much more realistic if there were a load aggregator or an electric vehicle aggregator that could pool the flexibility of the demand side and use it in auctions that would enhance the flexibility of the overall system, which would enable the renewable energy technologies to be integrated in a more welfare enhancing manner. So this is one area in which AI could be deployed. And furthermore, if you envision it in this way, it could empower the demand side of the energy market so that even if AI were being adopted by the suppliers and they were somehow able to use AI to enhance their market power, and by market power, I mean they have so much market share that they can actually move energy around in order to shift prices in their favor, you could counteract that by empowering the demand side through aggregators or electric vehicle aggregators to keep the market somehow in check. And furthermore, you could go one level up and regulatory authorities could even marshal AI in order to anticipate how power companies or aggregators are going to behave so that they're able to, again, design the markets in a way that can align the incentives of the private decision makers with the public good. And this might seem far-fetched, but again, existing legislation from the EU's clean energy package could be adapted towards this end. So let's go to the next slide, please, and I will give a case study that illustrates how these concepts could be realized. So this has to do with local energy communities that have the right to access and manage the energy that they create. So I think this cuts across the key requirements K4 and K6, and this has to do with the village of Schönau in Germany, where citizens got together and they created a cooperative called EWS, which is basically giving them the possibilities to set up their own microgrid that uses geothermal and solar power in order to generate energy. And what instigated this whole transition was actually the Chernobyl nuclear disaster, and which caused the citizens to become concerned about getting their power from nuclear and coal as they were in the 80s, because that's what the incumbent utility provided. So they wanted to change the supply of energy. They went to the local government. They tried to lobby for a change. They were not able to do so. Actually, they had to take the local government to court in order to take over the franchise. And the point is that you shouldn't have to go to this extent. And instead, somehow you can think about having a regulatory environment that encourages localized use of energy that is much more tailored to local needs, instead of having these giant behemoths who are often relying on large-scale power stations that are not suitable for the future, in which we have small-scale renewable energy plants. So actually, there was, I think yesterday or maybe earlier today, a discussion about more government or less government. And I think that this is somehow maybe not always, this is sometimes a false dichotomy, because even if you want to have more possibility for markets to take place, to improve efficiency, you have to have the regulatory environment in which market players can prosper. And if you have an environment in which local providers are barred, then that's not going to enhance efficiency. Anyway, so this EWS, its expansion was facilitated by the liberalization of the electricity industry around the same time, because that ensured non-discriminatory access to networks. And furthermore, because it was a cooperative, this also taps into the whole issue of transparency, because their decision-making processes and certification of where the energy has been sourced adds confidence to their potential customers about where the energy is coming from and how the decisions are being made. So basically, if you have a trustworthy AI paradigm, it can also provide an opportunity to facilitate this kind of community of prosumers, local energy communities, where citizens are acting both as producers and consumers and have the right to access and to manage the energy that they created. And again, it was somehow fortuitous that there was electricity industry liberalization going on around the same time that facilitated this. And now EWS is able to leverage that by being able to sell power not only locally, but across Germany, and even trading in neighboring countries. It's providing energy to over 170,000 consumers, and it's become financially viable and not just a curiosity. So basically, the conclusion here is that future environmental solutions should not face these kinds of barriers. Nobody should have to go to court in order to get this done. And in fact, regulation could be based on the existing Article 16 about energy communities that's in the EU Directive 2019-944. This is the internal market for electricity that explicitly prevents member states from barring local energy communities from access to energy and ensures that their financial settlements take place in a transparent manner. So this links with key requirement 6 about reducing barriers to entry for environmental solutions. So with that, I will end and hand over to Ronan. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Afzal. Yes, very interesting your presentation. And now I would like to move to different case studies in energy sector, which are connected with something very sensitive, which is data protection by default and data protection by design. And who else can explain better than me what's going on here? Ronan, I guess the stage is yours, please.